David. I never saw myself as the go-to guy, but I thought I was the jitney guy. But anyway, well, I get a lot of nicknames working here. But so I'll just roll into it, try to catch up with some time. This project, as Mary Kay had said, came about through a grant from Federal Highway. It was a competitive grant. We were one of only 5 agencies in the country to have received it. And essentially, the grant was to allow us, state agencies, to assess the vulnerability of our infrastructure, of our transportation infrastructure system, to the effects of climate change. And of course, it's a Federal Highway grant, and they had developed a conceptual model, and they wanted to test drive it. So that was one of the other major purposes of the grant opportunity. But as we saw it as an opportunity to build capacity among state agencies and MPOs to analyze climate data and assess vulnerability. And if you see, if I just show you down here, the agencies that were involved in this project. And Mitch Harrison talked about working together. I think we really did work together here. We have the three MPOs in New Jersey, NJTPA, DVRPC. I forgot to give them a name tag this morning, so they're in a bad mood. South Jersey Transportation Planning Organization, as well as our state transportation agencies, New Jersey Transit. Dave Gillespie was a partner on this, as well as NJDOT and DEP, who is in the room today. So we had a grand partnership, I like to call it. And so we were learning about this as we went along, as well as the idea to pivot to help our counties and municipalities in assessing their own vulnerable infrastructure. We know they're doing it, but they are severely constrained on resources and on knowledge. And so the idea was to do this work and then sort of help them do their work. So that was the purpose. And I talked about this conceptual model. I'm not going to go into this, but usually when I give this talk, and I've given it in a number of locations, there's someone from Federal Highway saying, here's what the pilots were supposed to do. So that person's not here, so I just took a slide and say, this was the conceptual model. We basically did every step, practically every step that's in this model. And then the idea was at the end, and we get our results, we talk to Federal Highway about how do we make this better, what do we do differently. So it's a learning process. It really was truly a learning process. So here's how we did it. We had to choose a study area as part of the grant application. And the way we did it was to choose 2 study areas. New Jersey is a small state, and yet we cannot study the entire state with the resources and the time frame that we were given. So we looked at 2 areas, coastal, from pretty much Raritan Bay to Cape May, and the Atlantic Ocean, obviously, to the east. We used the New Jersey Parkway as sort of set as our western boundary, with slight changes to take in parallel roads, as well as a significant amount of wetlands that were in the southern part of the state. So, and this is a very important part of New Jersey for those visiting. If you come a couple months from now, you'll be able to go down to Jersey Shore, where it's about $38 billion worth of economic activity is generated for the cities and towns and beaches along the shore. It's a vulnerable area and yet is critical economically. The other area we wanted to look at was what we call part of the Northeast Corridor. This is a dense set of rail and highway infrastructure. New Jersey Turnpike, the Northeast Corridor passenger, as well as some freight rail that is involved that is included in this region. And it really goes from pretty much the Raritan River along the Northeast Corridor down to Delaware Memorial Bridge. And what's really great about these study areas is that all 3 MPOs had some study area. That was, fair is fair. We all had a part of the region, or part of the study area that was in our respective regions. So that was the study areas. And obviously the idea was that the methodology and process we used to study these areas could then be applied to other areas, knowing that obviously Mitch showed a bunch of very important critical infrastructure north of these study areas. But the things that we were doing here can be utilized and applied elsewhere. So we had to look at our assets. One of the first steps was, what are you going to study? And again, when we brought Cambridge Systematics, the consultant, and their partners on board, and some of them are here today, we want to do everything. Anything we possibly get our hands on, we wanted to study. And some of the earlier partnership meetings was, all right, well, that's nice, but what's reality? And the reality is, well, you only can study with the data that you have, and the quality of that data. And so what it turned out is that we had to sort of narrow our field a little bit to be able to actually do the work. And we settled on roadways, obviously, and using DOT's congestion management system, that roadway network. Bridges, the bridges that are associated with those roadways. Passenger rail, Amtrak and New Jersey Transit, as well as some freight rails, Norfolk Southern, CSX, and some lower class 2 and 3 rail. We looked at a few airports, general aviation airports, not Newark or Teterboro, but some of the smaller aviation airports, which do move a significant amount of people. Wetlands, that was something that DEP was interested in seeing, as well as we didn't have that many tunnels. I know Mitch talked about tunnels. We only, in the study area, there were only 2 tunnels, Route 29 in Trenton and the Atlantic City Marina in Atlantic County. So that was what we wanted to study. Now, the other thing about this, you don't have to know this either, but one of the things about the conceptual model was, okay, pick your assets, now define what's critical, because we're not going to be able to address every vulnerability out there. The idea was, let's figure out what's most critical first. And we had this, again, another idea of let's have this very interconvoluted, very complex type of criticality structure, which again, we had to limit it because of data that we for the time frame of the project, we could not get. And this is something that is a challenge that I will come back to at the end of my talk, which is when you're doing vulnerability, you need the right kind of data and the right kind of attributes for that data. Again, a lot of the data we got was in GIS, and so the metadata is in some places limited, or it comes in formats that you can't use. And this is something that that I think we could talk more later about how we try to work around some of those barriers. But in any way, what we ended up doing was looking at mostly access and connectivity. Are the pieces of roadway that we're studying, do they link people to jobs? Where are the job locations? Where are the population centers? And if a road link is critical to moving people from job centers to their home, that's going to be more critical than a road link that does not do that. And we also looked at the volumes. So, in terms of freight, what's the value of the freight as moving along that rail line? Again, for transit, for rail, there's even though we have a dense passenger rail network, every piece of that rail network is critical, and that's how we treated passenger rail. But it's a simplified methodology, and yet still pretty complicated. So the first step was all the 3 MPOs have their own TAZ network. We had to stitch it all together and first define which TAZs are critical, which TAZs are not, traffic analysis zones. And that's based on population and employment density. So you see that darker colors in orange and red denote more critical TAZs, areas in yellow less critical. And then what you do is you have the roadway network, the CMS network, and you basically through origin destination pairs assign trips to this network. And then after you've assigned those trips, they go from one critical TAZ to another or less critical TAZ. That gets a score. And then you add the traffic volumes in the CMS to get an adjusted score. So it's kind of quantitative, all right? And it's a first pass analysis. But what you get is essentially your road network with varying degrees of criticality. And so, again, we did it for the entire state because we have so much traffic flowing from one place to another that it really made sense to look at it statewide. And what you see here is areas in dark blue are what we call more critical. They have a higher scoring than roads that are light blue that are less critical. Now, I mean, for the first pass, it made a lot of sense. The Turnpike and the Parkway, they were going to be critical, and they indeed are critical. But obviously, if you are a county or a municipality and you want to do this, you might have different critical roads for your area. So again, it's a methodology that has some robustness that could be applied at a more local level. So when you look at, I'm just zooming into part of the road network that was critical, Hurricane Irene, when we did this study, Hurricane Irene happened. And so almost everything we did was seen through the lens of Irene afterwards. So this is a picture of Route 1 and 295 interchange 295 in Mercer County. And you can see that the road is impassable after Hurricane